Welcome to the Health and Pharma Supply Chain Summit. I'm JT Engstrom with FreightWaves. Joining me today is Chris Wolfe, CEO of PowerFleet. Chris, it's a pleasure to have you join us. I'm looking forward to our discussion topic today, which is pharma supply chains and lessons abroad. So thank you for your time.
Hey, thanks for inviting me. Thanks, JT.
And I know you all have a lot of activities in the space and a lot of experience in the space. I think before we dive into the topic, can we start off first by talking a little bit about your background prior to PowerFleet and then after joining PowerFleet?
Yeah, I started my career actually in logistics, writing software, enterprise class software for shipment tracking and transportation management systems. Sorry, I did that at Roadway Express and also at Leaseway Transportation, which is now Penske Logistics. Segued from that to work at Qualcomm, the Omnitrax division, for about 13 years. I actually ran that division for 5 years. We did a phenomenal job by my customers and by my employees. Retired in 2005. Since that, I kind of did some strategic consulting in the space, and then I joined PowerFleet in 2016. And I think we'll talk a little bit about PowerFleet, but it's been a great run, since joining.
That's awesome. And I think what's wonderful about your background is the combination of direct operating company exposure, asset heavy and asset light, also the influence of working in a technological environment within that, and then transitioning over to both your Qualcomm experience and advisory services, which I think gives you a pretty broad perspective on how the industry has evolved over the past decade plus, which is great.
Yeah, I think you just called me old. Thanks, JT.
I would never. We appreciate the experience. And so within that, can you talk to us a little bit about your time at PowerFleet, the differentiated services at PowerFleet, how PowerFleet thinks about addressing the space and growing the business?
Yeah, we we actually take a bottoms-up approach in our architecture, really starting from the cargo itself. So if you think about, ultimately technology will let let the cargo be self-aware. And if you go with that thought process, then everything you build, whether you're tracking the truck, the trailer, the chassis, the container, the pallet, the carton, it all has to fit in that Rubik's Cube. And so what we do is we build telemetry platforms. They're not tracking units. Every time I hear that, my head wants to go crazy. But so what we build is very intelligent mobility platforms that are edge computers that can basically bring a lot of sensor data, whether that be temperature shock, vibe, also imaging, because an image is worth 1,000 words. Take that up, be able to process that through machine learning and artificial intelligence, and then take that meaningful data and help companies make decisions. I mean, we have the who's who in our customer base, from Publix to United States Postal Service, and we're also on the dock. A lot of people don't understand that. So when you look at supply chain, it's like, can you go from the fork, which goes to the bin, get the freight, take it to the trailer, and actually have complete visibility of the full supply chain? And we actually have mobility units that are actually on, like in Toyota Motor Manufacturing, great customer of ours, Georgia Pacific, Procter & Gamble, Nestle, they have our units actually on the dock, moving freight every day.
Yeah, that's tremendous. And that's a super high value service, clearly pre-COVID, but perhaps even more so now post-COVID or after the start of COVID, if you will. Can you talk to us a little bit about how the value or the positioning of those services, those technological services, has either increased or changed perhaps a little bit since the pandemic, and perhaps the urgency with which those services are needed in that space specifically?
Yeah, I think it all comes down to velocity now. Again, I would almost say pre-COVID, you had ELD and the HOS mandate in the industry, which kind of constricted over-the-road time for drivers. And that was already exacerbating the time at the dock, right? So how long are you in a yard? How long are you at the dock? Can you get the driver in and out and make so he can make more money and he or she can make more money and get more miles? So our technology, what we do is we focus on, hey, the trailer, the chassis, is it in the right status? With our freight camera, you can actually see the freight. How many times have a driver thought he was picking up an empty trailer and, it's not really empty. They're using it for storage. Or maybe they never unloaded it 100%. They're using it for warehousing. We can actually show you. The driver can actually look in the trailer. So you just stopped a mishook, and he's going to get down the road and find out he has to take it back. Same with on the dock. It gets about velocity. How fast are the trailers getting loaded? How fast are the trailers getting unloaded? And by the way, with our technology, I can tell you how to unload it before the trailer gets there. Is it palletized freight? Is there locking bars? Is it special roll? And by the way, is there also like a shift in transit? And with the sensor data on the topic we're going to get to, I can tell you that was probably a temperature incursion, a humidity issue, or a shock issue at the pallet level.
Yeah, that's tremendous, and that visibility is very valuable. So within that, can you talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing around the globe with respect to pharmaceutical distribution, specifically related to the pandemic we're in, and how that distribution has changed a little bit? Maybe the distribution is the same, but some of the pressures or needs for urgency have changed.
Yeah, it's different all around the globe. Literally, it's different in every 50 states right now. That's kind of been our problem. We don't really have a master plan. Hopefully that's going to be taking effect. We have operations in Israel. Excuse me. We have operations in Israel, and obviously everyone I believe knows Israel's way ahead of the curve on implementing vaccines. 37% of the population's already vaccinated. About over 3 million people are vaccinated. That doesn't sound like a lot, but they only have 9 million people. But everyone, this is where like government-sponsored healthcare comes into play, because everyone's on an HMO. And so they can actually manage that direct, get needles into arms a lot faster than we can, and make sure the follow-up is there as well. And obviously, they're a small geography, and they can mobilize very quickly. That all being said, is at the state level, with our government's help, we could be doing the same thing. It's just like, FEMA needs to get involved. Now they are. It's like they were kind of persona non grata there for, I would say AWOL for like, a year. But, what's FEMA? It's a Federal Emergency Management Agency. It's like, it's not just a hurricane agency. They could put up, pop-up tents and vaccination centers, and they can get the PPE in. They have the logistics backbone and the capabilities to help with the private side. So it depends on the geography, and we actually use our own data. We did it, pre-COVID, but to actually see what parts of the economy actually were being impacted. Because we're actually on the dock, we're actually in the yard, we're actually on rental cars. It's like, so we can actually look at the data and see the impact on the economy. Sorry, and then trying to get to where the distribution itself, right? So from the pharmacy to like the bulk distribution centers, that's already handled. That's handled by the big pharma companies and the contracts they have. The real problem we've had here in the States is really that last mile. Just getting it to, and specifically like the Pfizer vaccine, because of the cold temperature requirements. It's can't be handled by regular handling means. So you just can't take it to CVS, right? You have to take it to a special hospital that can keep it cool for the amount of time.
So it sounds like what you're seeing internationally could potentially be a great framework to leverage domestically. And, we're perhaps a little bit of a late adopter, but, with that in mind, have the benefit of being able to shop for what we see as the best framework internationally. And hopefully are doing a good job of adopting that and then implementing that.
Yeah, it's always good to be a clone. Nothing wrong with being a copycat if it's a good process, right?
Right. And you mentioned a few stats prior to us connecting regarding not just the vaccination rates, but some of the favorable statistics post-vaccination. Can we talk about that a little bit of what you're seeing overseas, and perhaps how we might be able to think about that here domestically?
Yeah, there's a Goldman Sachs report out, and I think they got their data from the Maccabi Research and Innovation Center in Israel. And and they specifically looked at people over 60 who had received their vaccinations. And initially, when you just look at the high-level data, it doesn't look good. because I have a stand-up COVID meeting, with my executives around the globe every Monday, and it's like the infection rates, the hospitalizations, and the death rates in Israel have not slowed down, right? So you'd say, wow, you're 37% of the population's vaccinated, but yet you're not seeing the cause and effect, that you'd like to see. But when you look at this report and you look at the specific age groups that now have had their second vaccine, and it's 12 days later, so you've given it time to get to its efficacy. Literally, there's a huge drop off. I mean, like in the number of infections in that age group, as well as just people being hospitalized and deaths. I mean, it's pretty amazing. I mean, it goes from like 40% of the population over 60 were infected to, of getting new infections to like 5%. So that was a bright spot. We just saw that today, actually.
That's very encouraging. It's very encouraging. And so now, can we talk in a little bit more detail and depth around how PowerFleet is playing within this space, given a lot of the dynamics that we just discussed with respect to pharma/COVID? What are some of the services that you all are offering that are differentiated in the marketplace, and how do you think about providing incremental visibility and control and supporting the increasing of the velocity of distribution for these mission critical elements of the supply chain?
Yeah, it's fairly new business opportunity for PowerFleet. I would say it's about 2 years since our acquisition of Pointer in Israel, and Pointer, by the way, had operations around the globe, and ID Systems was the precursor to PowerFleet, and we had operations in the U.S. and Europe. So combined, we actually literally have a global footprint today. But when you look at in Israel and what we're doing with the pharmaceutical companies, we're actually with 7 different pharmaceutical companies, and it's either tracking lab testing, whether or not it's plasma or just lab work back and forth, and making sure it's at the right temperature, it's at the right humidity, and it's at the right place. By the way, down to the carton level. So we have sensors that actually can go in the carton itself, and again, not the Pfizer vaccine, because there's not a lot of sensors that will go at that low temperature. But the AstraZeneca and the others, that we can actually monitor and manage those. So we're actually helping with the distribution of with those pharmaceutical companies of the COVID vaccines. We're also helping with blood, plasma, and just you name it. If it's a medical, even testing kits, PPE, it's like we can track it at the carton level and make sure it gets to where it needs to go and in the right state that it needs to be in. Obviously, integrating back end to the Health Ministry of Israel, as well as MADA. A lot of people don't know who MADA is. MDA. That's the emergency response group within Israel, and we're on everything from ambulances to defibrillators and all the way onto medical motorcycles. So it's like they can actually monitor the whole process. Like, hey, I got to go out to a retirement home and vaccinate everybody there. That would be handled primarily through a MADA organization.
That's very valuable. And that's incredible service or offering to be able to provide. And so can you talk a little bit about your anticipated outlook and expectations, and perhaps what some key enablers for success will be within the context of this whole conversation?
I think in the U.S. Specifically, I think Israel, they have handle on it. And by the way, I think, the administration currently today is looking at best practices. And I just heard, this week that, they're going to get vaccines to the pharmacies. I've been saying that for 2 months, right? Until the vaccines, you can go to CVS or Walgreens or Rite Aid and get your shot. You're not going to get 300 million Americans vaccinated unless you set up, getting to the other thing, huge vaccination centers, and that's where a FEMA would come in. So again, you need the Uber Lord for logistics, and that's the CDC, maybe working with FEMA, and then bringing in the private sector to help. I mean, the private sector, there's companies that do this, night and day. It's like huge logistics companies. The best transportation companies in the world are here. And it's just, that's where you use the Defense Production Act or something like that to say, hey, we need to get, PPE in mass to this place and get it distributed. And so I think that partnership is going to happen. You're starting to see the administration starting to make that move in a big way. So I think after the bulk of people get vaccinated, which hopefully it'll be by the end of the year, then it can go back into its normal. Hey, I'm going to go get my flu booster program, which already exists.
And now, given that expectation, the outlook, understanding the dynamics, understanding your position in the industry space, can you talk to us a little bit about both how you/PowerFleet thinks about evolving the service offering and perhaps what may or may not be on the future development product roadmap? And in addition to that, talk a little bit about how shippers in the space, both shippers and consumers of the distribution services, how they should be thinking about using the supply chain networks, factors they should be thinking through, and other elements that they should be thoughtful about to ensure success.
I mentioned a little earlier, I think, is just the visibility. It comes down to true visibility and velocity of the supply chain. So we're actually, do we have surge potential? Do we have the ability to move even from the beginning of supply? We found out at the beginning of COVID, we ran out of toilet paper, right? We ran out of certain foodstuffs. We couldn't transition bulk food producers into, home delivery type packaging. And I think as a country, we need to tackle those bigger problems of, hey, how do we have flexibility so we can, not just so specialized. I think we were very good at specializing our supply chains to get efficiencies and cost out, that we got too specialized, because all of a sudden, the choke points happen. So I think for customers specifically, the new technologies, there's a confluence of technologies that are going to allow you to have a lot more visibility and a lot more data to drive real-time decision making. Stop the problem before it happens. And using machine learning, as I mentioned before, artificial intelligence. It's like looking at corollary and collateral information. We're actually can capture data that from not just the door sensor, know what door it's at. I can know the door of the trailer, is it open or closed, know the temperature of the trailer. By the way, maybe change the set point of the trailer before you open the door, so that way that temperature incursion doesn't have any impact. So that's proactively taking care of those situations. And by the way, if you track it down to the pallet level, one of our sensors is called a multi-sense. It's literally the size of a couple of 50-cent pieces stacked together. You can put that anywhere. It's like, if you have food regulations, it's not much different from pharma. It's very strict, and it's going to get, just more onerous. And that's better for all of us, right? I want to make sure my vaccine that I get, wasn't sitting on the shelf and is old, and it was maintained through its, chain of custody at the right temperature the whole way. And the same with food. And I think that's what we try and do, is help those customers, help those endpoint customers. Like Publix is a great customer of ours. It's like we make sure we help their drivers get to where they need to go. We make sure, their trailers and the refrigerated trailers are kept at the right temp, and we make sure they know where their dry van trailers are at all times. So again, that's what we try and do, is help our customers make decisions in real time and get rid of problems and bottlenecks.
Yeah, that's remarkable. And I think everyone in the country would be in agreement. Everybody in the world would be in agreement that we're very hopeful that we'll continue to successfully navigate our way through this, and hopefully learn a lot of lessons from it in case, one, so we can be more preventative up front, but then two, if something occurs again, we can be prepared for it.
Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah. So with that, Chris Wolfe, CEO PowerFleet. Chris, thank you very much for your time. It's great to have you on. Hopefully we'll have you on again soon.
Hey, thanks, JT. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm JT Engstrom with FreightWaves. Thank you all for joining us.